Hello and welcome to the first season of Conversations on Magic. Each season we are going to talk to one magician so we can get deeper and talk about several aspects of magic. In this season we talk to Michael Close. Hello, my name is Guilherme and I am from Brazil.
Hi, I'm Michael Close. I'm here in Canada, and thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you called it a show, but yes, let's go ahead. And so what I wanted to talk to you, it's just a conversation and I wanted to have with you. There is one thing that was very important to me at the beginning when I first showed you my attempt at an act. And it was perhaps 5 to 6 minutes long and there was like a lot of things going on. And I used to bring some paper and put the paper and hide the paper out of the table, out of the view, and then bring it back. And then my hands were all over the place. They were also hidden at some point, and then I would show my hands again. And there was this very important thing that you mentioned to me, which was if it's unnecessary, don't do it. It was something like that. It wasn't this phrase, but something like that. Do you have any tips on most common mistakes that people do when they are like putting together an act, not just one trick,
Sure.
right? Putting together something.
Sure. One of the things that's very difficult, and certainly when I was growing up as a young magician, really the only way that you had to observe yourself and watch what you were doing is to practice in front of a mirror. And the problem with practicing in front of a mirror is that you're intently watching yourself. You tend to watch the moves that you're doing. And there's a tendency to blink, believe it or not, when you do a sleight, because that way you make sure that you don't see it. So it has been so beneficial to have the ability to, like we're doing here, to just record something and put a video camera on yourself and make a recording. Because when you record with a camera, if say you're recording on your phone or something, you're not actually seeing yourself doing it if you don't have it turned around so you can watch the screen. And this is really helpful. I think it's important when you're practicing a move to be able to see what you're doing to make sure that you're executing it properly. But recording is a very useful thing. What is hard though is as you're working on a routine, you can get way too, what we say in English, you get way too close to it. You are very conscious of everything that you need to do and how everything works, which makes it a lot harder to spot the problems where you're doing things that you don't need to do. So much in the same way as in a play where the director, you don't see the actors trying to direct themselves for the most part. The actors do what they do, and the director does what he does, sitting out in the audience and seeing how the whole effect is, watching. And that makes it much, much easier to spot things that that may be not needed to perform the effect. One of the things that you and I have talked about is that it's really important for the audience to be aware of what the effect is so that they understand the conditions. And so anything that takes them away from that understanding, you have to be careful of. You may have to eliminate. You may have to do something else. Another thing is that you want to try to make sure that you have internal logic in your performance. And I remember when you first showed me the effect that you performed on Fool Us, you had this pad of paper involved. And I don't quite even remember why you had that pad of paper at this point in time. But I made the comment that if you have a piece of paper, then why are you using your phone for a prediction? Because you should have just written it down on that pad of paper. First of all, it'd be a lot more convincing just to see a piece of paper because people understand the technology of paper and pen. they know that there's not that much that can be tricked or gimmicked. So that was one of the first things that went, was that piece of paper. But like I say, it's very difficult to think about that. I mean, I was and it's not just a beginning. I don't want to call you a beginner, but somebody who's starting out in magic, because you know, I've discovered with you, you take this whole thing very seriously. So, and you think about it a lot. But even for professional performers who have done the same routine for years and years and years and years, there's the tendency to have a blind spot and not see where something doesn't make sense. I was working with a friend of mine. Maybe I can do it here so you can see it here.
Oh, no, you can move the camera also.
Yeah, the trick is not important, but at one point my friend needed to do a second deal on a card, so that he would come up and he would do the second deal with the cards out of sight, and he'd put the card down. And the next card he was going to put down, which would have been a duplicate, which is part of the trick, he dealt it this way so you could see the deal. And then he'd bring it back up and do another thing. And I said, you know, you have to make all those deals look the same. You can't just do the move. You can't just hold your hands in one position when you're doing the move and hold your hand in another position when you're not doing the move. But because people will pick up on that. They may not know exactly why they're seeing what they see, but they may not understand what rings false, but they'll sense that something isn't quite right. So, but it's a real hard thing to spot those things when you're on your own.
Yeah. I've seen exactly this example that you mentioned. The person was dealing, it was any card, any number, and then the person started dealing like this: 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the person, I think the person would show the card 5, 6, and then when it came to a certain point, well, actually, no, it was a little bit, sorry, it was the other way around. It was like, it was shown like this. Let me see if I can show it. Yeah. So it was being displayed 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at some point, they changed their hands like this: 6, 7, 8. So it just switched to the second deal now, and it was dealing the second deal. So of course, because I knew it was any card, any number. Right. Sequences are important, and second deal can help. Everything adds up, right? But as you said, if you're not a magician, you have no idea of all those details, you might not find out what is happening. But there's something weird. Why was the person doing like this, and now the person is doing like that?
Right.
And
you know, sometimes the magic books recommend that you can get away with an action like that if, you know, as you're dealing, you know, it's a very measured, very slow thing. So you see the deck as you deal, and maybe the last few cards, your hand just comes up or something like that. But it's still it still looks funny, because you have to ask yourself a question that you and I discuss many times when we're talking about things. You have to ask, well, why am I moving my hands into this position? And if the answer is because the method says I have to move my hands in this position, then that's a dangerous thing. Then I think you have to go and make everything look like that moment when when you have to do the second deal. And in that case, I think you're better off just, you know, keeping your hands out of position that way. So, you know, it's funny, because there are ways to get around that situation. You know, Di Vernon used to do a trick called the slap trick, and it was basically not a named card at any number, but a selected card at any number. And his method was really very clever, because he never had to change the position of his hand as he dealt. In other words, there was none of this going on. So the whole thing looked natural all the way through. But and that's in print. That's in one of the Vernon Chronicles books, and I suggest looking it up if a trick like that is important to you.
Slap trick. What was the name again?
Oh, it was called the stop. Oh no, I'm sorry, not the stop. The slap trick. SLAP.
Slap trick.
Slap trick.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah. So you mentioned two other things that I remember a lot was. It's the first that you mentioned was everything must be intentional. So the props. So if I had a piece of paper, there must be a clear intention why I use it, and it must not. It must make sense in the world, in the fantasy world that I created. And when I showed you my first routine, actually there were two videos that I sent, and one of them was the one that went to Fullers. The other one was the one that used the paper actually. So the other one, I used the paper because the method required me to buy time. And so I used the paper just to pretend that I'm talking about parallel universes and stuff like that. But then you asked me, okay, so if you know it, why isn't it written in the paper? And then, so let's get rid of the paper.
Yeah, and this is a limitation of magic. It's one of the challenges of magic. I remember a friend of mine used to do a trick with $50, and he'd make him go from hand to hand or something, but he had a very funny line. He said, I do this with $50 because I can't do it with manhole covers, the big covers they put on the street where you go down into the sewers. And that's the nature of it. We tend to use the props that fit our hands and our workspace and what have you, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense sometimes. It's when you think about magic with coins, one of the problems is that the coins that in the United States at least, the coins that coin magic are built around are $50 for the most part, 50-cent pieces, sometimes silver dollars. But those are two coins that nobody sees, what we say, in circulation. In other words, if you're walking down the street and there's a homeless person and you want to give them some money, nobody has a silver dollar or a 50-cent piece to give them. They just don't use those coins anymore. So where it used to be that you could do a coin trick and it seemed, impromptu on the spur of the moment because everybody had coins, now you can't anymore. It used to be that you could borrow a hat, a man's bowler hat or a fedora or something, and do a trick with it. Not anymore. A lot of tricks have in it, not a lot, but some say borrow a handkerchief, borrow a man's handkerchief. Well, almost nobody carries those anymore. I mean, I remember carrying a handkerchief in my pocket when I was in, grade school and middle school, but you don't see that anymore. So, tricks change with the availability of whatever prop it uses. And it has to make sense. It has to make sense. You're right.
And I remember when I start some moments in my life currently, I realize the moments when you're influencing this situation appears in my line of thought. For instance, when I do the email effect and I send sometimes the email to myself. When I wrote it for the first time after I did the Fulls and we were talking about it and so on, when I realized, okay, let me send the email to myself so I can do this and that, I could do something different. And so instead of going with the line, okay, so I sent an email to myself, why did I send an email to myself? There's no reason to send an email to myself. And well, actually I do send a lot of emails to myself, but perhaps I'm the only one because everything that I want to write down at any moment, I send an email to myself. But people might not believe it. So what I did was I had a line of thoughts, and I had a dream. Mm-hmm. So last night I was sleeping, and then my son wake up, which is true. Every day he wakes up in the middle of the night. It's not people who know me understand it. People who have child understand it. And when I went back to my bed, I realized I just had a dream because that's normal. That's life, right? You realize you had a dream, and I had to write it down quickly, and nobody has a pen and paper next to the bedroom nowadays, right? So I sent an email to myself. Sure. And there it is, the email to myself, and there it goes. And the first time I thought about it, I realized, okay, that's Michael Close complaining to me, okay, does it really make sense, and so on. And I said, okay, perhaps this makes sense. And
It's we have really only three things that you can do when you're looking at a trick and you run into a problem like that. The first step, of course, is somehow being able to identify the problem that you need to fix, and that's probably a topic for another discussion, because we could talk for a long time about that. But generally speaking, when you find a problem, there's only three ways to fix it. One way is that you try to find a better method. So, for example, in trying to fix the trick we were talking about where the guy has to tilt up his hand to do the second deal, well, Vernon has a better method for that. You can find methods that don't require that, where the deal is very fair. For example, Aussie Wins method for card in any card in any number, where the deck comes out of the card box, is a really great solution to that, because the deal is very fair. And when you watch when you watch him perform that, everything looks like it's supposed to. There aren't really any moves there that you can immediately spot and say, well, that doesn't seem right. Why would he do that? So in order to do that, to solve it with a method, you have to be pretty well read. You have to have a lot of experience. You need to, discover lots of different methods to see what's available, and maybe one of them will work. The other way to fix the problem is to come up with some story, some pattern, in your script that rationalizes away that. So, yes, nobody sends emails to themselves. But if you woke up in the middle of the night and you had a weird dream and you wanted to make sure you didn't forget it and your phone was right there, you'd probably quickly send yourself an email talking about it. And so something that would be odd or would ring false all of a sudden makes sense. And that's a very big thing. The third thing is unfortunate, and sometimes you just don't have an answer. And so you have to put that trick aside until you get some, brilliant insight about a pattern thing, or maybe you read more or study more. I know, having worked with Penn and Teller since, 1998. So, 22 years, 22 years. Yeah, 22 years. Working with them on shows and things like that. Teller does an enormous amount of research when they're going to add a trick to their repertoire. So whatever trick they're going to do, his first step is to really find out how every other magician ever did that trick. And, sometimes they'll use a method, well, this guy's method is great. I don't have anything better than that. So I'll go ahead and do that. Which is why I've always said to magicians that it's so useful to read magic books and to study the books. It helps a lot in solving these problems.
I can understand that.
And it's always great, and this is probably why it's you've made remarkable progress. I don't remember when you and I first started working on stuff together, but it was probably in like the late summer or early fall of last year, I'm guessing, of 2019. But it's in my case, I had a mentor, a fellow named Harry Reiser, and so when we got together about once a week, maybe a couple times a week. I was going to school at a music school that wasn't very far from where he lived in Indianapolis. And so I'd go down and I'd go over to his house if it was okay, and we'd sit and we'd talk about things. And what's very useful about that is that, if you have somebody who's been in magic a while and has a way of approaching magic you like, just watching how they solve problems on their tricks becomes a very useful thing. I remember there are a lot of times that Harry would suggest this, that, or the other thing, and I go, "Oh, why didn't I think of that? That's really good." And other times he would just say to me, "Mike, that's no good. That's no good." And we try to figure it out, but there wasn't an answer. And so the trick just got put aside for the time being. So that's what's beneficial there.
Yeah, you've done this to me a few times already. Both, yeah, two things. One is very common that I show you something, and then you say, you know what you can do, and then there is either you can do this other way, so it's another method which is easier, which is very common, and you do it. And also you say, you know what you can do, and then you add something again very small, very basic, because I don't have a huge repertoire of things that I can do, but it adds a lot to the effects. And so this is very common, and it's also very common nowadays, less common than before, but sometimes also to say, you know what, do you remember the other one we were talking about? Let's talk about the other one, because this one,
it's one of those things. I did a taping with a magician in Canada named Ryan Joyce. And basically, I just went over to the theater where he was, and he had 4 new things that he was working on. And he just videoed the whole process of me working with him on these 4 new things. And just to show how this works, this whole process works. And I was very lucky because I was able to come up with something that sort of moved the trick forward a little bit in its development for each of the 4 tricks. But I told him before we started, I said, it's possible I'll run out of ideas and we won't hit on it yet. There was a famous magician named Al Baker who said that one of the problems with magicians is that they stop thinking too soon. In other words, a lot of times you'll get the trick where it works and it gets a good reaction and you stop. Sometimes it's worthwhile to, cast your mind back, to that trick and keep asking yourself, is everything as clean as it could be? It's funny. And sometimes the solutions are really, really simple. I have a trick that's pretty well known among magicians called the pothole trick. And I started working on that trick in 1984 when Michael Weber showed me his version of a moving hole trick. And I wanted to do it with a business card and talk about potholes because I grew up in Indiana and they have lots and lots of potholes in Indiana during the winter. And there was a problem there I could not solve. And it took me 4 years of thinking about it on and off. And then the answer was a very, very simple solution. And I just kicked myself for not seeing it sooner. But it's a thing that sometimes can evade you. And it's one of the things that I find really interesting about magic. Who was it? Nietzsche, who said that the creative mind plays with the things it loves. And so it's more a play than work a lot of the times. Although, obviously when you're, if somebody's being hired for lessons or something, you do feel that pressure of if it's being work and not just all play. But thinking about these things is fun for me. And I really am happy if I can find a solution to a problem. There was a young man who they're considering for Fool Us. And I was working with him on his trick. And I realized that after we worked this whole thing out and it was okay, I realized I had missed a huge error in logic in terms of the way the trick works. Now, the fix was quite simple, but it was right here and I didn't see it until I started to work on another question he had. And I went, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense at all. We can't do this. So it's a process, but it's fun.
It takes time, yeah. There's something that whenever I talk to other magicians and they see me handling cards, the first thing that they give feedback back to me is, oh, you should read this and that book because you need to learn how to spread the cards, you need to learn how to do this professionally and so on. And And I do understand their point of view, but I do disagree with that, because I think I have two things. One going for me, if I don't learn how to spread the cards properly. And one is the one that you are mentioning, which is I have a limited amount of time to spend on Magic.
Right.
So if I'm going to spend my time on Magic, I would rather improve the effects that I'm working on right now, rather than learning more and more things, learn more, and not using them.
Yeah.
And so right now, my moment is better to focus on focus and keep improving. So I'm still working on the same, perhaps the same effects that I'm doing today with cards, 3 effects that I'm doing today with cards. We have started working on them it was December, I think.
Yeah.
And I saw the first time we spoke was November the 7th last year.
Last year,
So,
wow.
So it's
almost a year.
Yeah, almost a year now. And so that's one reason. And the other reason, just to finish, the other reason is that if I don't know how to spread the cards properly, I can definitely pass the sensation that I have no idea what I'm doing with the cards. And that will help me giving the idea that I'm not tricking you, I'm not fooling you in any way. I'm being very fair, whether it's true or not.
There's 2 trains of thought on that, obviously. One is, for a lot of magicians, they want to appear as skillful as they can possibly be.
Okay. Yeah.
For others, and I'm in this school, I prefer to conceal my technique so that you can't credit me with great skill, because I didn't do anything that looked like it required great skill. And the reason I adopt that approach is there's a risk if you start off your card trick set, with all kinds of crazy cuts and flourishes and what have you. People will say, "Oh, wow, he's really good with his hands. He really knows how to handle a deck of cards." But then that becomes a perfectly legitimate, rationalized excuse to explain away everything you did. I don't know exactly how that worked, but he's so good with a deck of cards, he can probably do anything. And then the magic disappears. If there's any kind of an explanation, then the magic disappears, and that's a problem. And there's also the point you touched on there, which is very difficult for people who are working on things by themselves. And I've mentioned this in terms of music. My training is as a musician. I went to college as a music theory and composition major, but I'm a piano player. And when you take a lesson on a musical instrument, most of the time the teacher tells you what's wrong. You don't get a lot of what's right, because they're there to correct any mistakes so you don't continue to make them. But they also keep you focused by giving you a limited amount of material to work on every week. Maybe you have a little piece, that you play, and you work on a scale, and then maybe there's a little etude, just a study to, work on finger strength and finger development and things like that. But with magicians, boy, there's so much stuff out there now. You can get so, maybe you go online to YouTube and you want to see how to do an Elmsley count, and there's, believe it or not, I think there's more than 10,000 videos out there that have something to do with the Elmsley count. Well, what's the right one? I don't know. I couldn't tell you which one. I wouldn't have watched all of them. But not only are there all those Elmsley count videos, but then there's other things you can, wonder what else this guy has. And all of a sudden, you're off to the races, and you never learn what it is you wanted to learn.
Yeah. I get it, and I do agree. And about the technique, I'm probably in the second school, which is I don't want to show the abilities that I have. Mm-hmm. And then there's the bonus, which I don't have those abilities. So there's no way that I would show that I have those abilities that I don't have. So I have this.
You're getting some chops, my friend. You're getting some things.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the focus, right? I focus on the ones that I can still hide, that I don't need to show. At least, again, it's a line of thought. It's one option, right? And okay, so let's wrap up this talk, and thank you very much for talking about this. I think it's very important for me. It was very important. It still is to get feedback from someone else, to be able to show. Of course, I can show to other people and demonstrate it, but it's different to get a feedback from someone which has a lot more experience than having the feedback from from the public itself, right?
Thanks. I'll just mention, I've written lots of books and I have lots of training and things like that. My website is just michaelclose.com. So I'm easy to find. But thank you, my friend. We'll talk
I'm
again.
very biased. Yes, I'm very biased and I do like it a lot. Thank you very much, Michael.
You're welcome.
Now, thanks for watching and listening to this conversation. I hope you enjoyed, like I did. You learned something, because I learned a lot. Thanks, Michael, for being part of that. And please remember to hit like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the section below. Thank you very much. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.